all training right now is pretty generic. It's pretty vanilla. Why don't we start tailoring that to employees from different education backgrounds, from potentially different cultures, different races, different genders? Because the way that we all learn and the way that we all consume, it's uniquely different.
CRN-TV is connecting you with the industry leaders who are protecting us from the latest security threats. Join me, Cass Cooper, as we highlight the expertise of women who are driving innovation and solving today's toughest cyber challenges. Welcome to Channel Women in Security. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Channel Women in Security. I'm so excited for this conversation and to bring this to you all out there in the world. Ghazal, it's so great to meet you and spend some time with you. How are you today?
Cass, so great to meet you as well. I am doing awesome. How are you doing?
I am doing so great. You know, wintertime. I had a great start to the new year. We're just here, doing all the things that we need to do in the world. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and your journey to being in the cybersecurity space and now the VP of Global Channel and Alliances.
Thank you so much, Cass. Well, I have been in tech for, almost 2 decades now. I can't believe how quickly time flies. Done various roles across Google, multiple different roles at Cisco, started my career off at HPE, and have the immense pleasure now of leading our global channels, alliances, and inside sales team at Rubrik, which is a leading data security company. And we just went IPO last year. So last year was a very, very exciting time.
Congratulations. That's a lot of work going IPO.
Yeah, it was. But the team did a phenomenal job at all the work that it takes to get a company prepared for IPO. So it's been an awesome journey, and we're just getting started.
Congratulations on going IPO. That is huge and amazing. And I'm so glad your team and you were able to pull that off. So let's talk a little bit about your expertise in cyber and cyber threats, right? So what do you see as the most pressing cyber threats that maybe disproportionately impact underrepresented and vulnerable groups?
Yeah, listen, I think that there are multiple cyber threats, but I would really love to speak a little bit of, instead of speaking about cyber threats, speak about some of the reasons why these vulnerabilities exist. Because
Yeah.
this conversation specifically for underrepresented groups, it just doesn't happen enough. When we talk about cyber threats and cyber vulnerabilities like ransomware, we talk about it for everyone, and everyone is affected, whether you are a small to medium-sized business, whether you are a Fortune 100 company, but we don't specifically talk about how much more it affects those underrepresented groups and why. So when I had the opportunity to have this conversation with you, I thought, we're having this conversation on why do these cyber threats, why do these vulnerabilities affect underrepresented groups more disproportionately?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we probably need to clarify is when we say underrepresented, what exactly does that mean? Because I think sometimes we think about underrepresented just in terms of race or only in terms of gender. But when you say underrepresented in this specific case, what does that mean to you?
It's a great clarifying question. I speak about underrepresentation both in race, both in gender, both in economic class. I would even take it as far as geography, because ultimately, if you are underrepresented in any of these areas, there are sort of 3 things that you will find. And those 3 things are: number one, you will likely have a lack of access to resources. So let me give you a perfect example of this. I have my first cousins that live in Pakistan, because I myself, born and raised in Scotland, as the accent suggests, but my family's originally from Pakistan. And I contrast my life with the life of my cousins. I've had the internet, Cass, for, I have had the internet for probably way more than 2 decades, when the days of the dial-up.
Yeah.
And
You have mail.
you have AOL, you have mail, right? And I speak to some of my cousins, and this is both women and male, and some of them still don't have the internet. And it blows my mind because we carry the internet on multiple devices in our pockets all the time. And in a way, I almost feel like that in itself is a privilege because depending on your location, depending on your social economic class, even in places like the UK, you might not even have one device, let alone multiple devices. You may not even have access to the internet. If you don't have access to the internet, how are you meant to even know about some vulnerabilities that might be affecting your laptop? And by the way, if you're buying a laptop or a mobile phone device, a lot of the times you're not even buying it brand new. You're buying it because it's pre-owned, pre-used, because you might not be able to afford it. And by the way, then if you get that, you don't have access to the internet, or you do have access to the internet, but you might not have access to the knowledge and the tools on how do you download the right software, what does a phishing attack look like, how do you avoid phishing attacks. There might be cyber criminals that are exploiting inequalities that are in the system. So, for example, my cousin in Pakistan, she really, really wants to get a diploma in the UK. And she's been saying to me, hey, I've been receiving all these emails from a company that can help me get a diploma in the UK. And can you research these companies? And Cass, I'm not joking. These companies are at hotmail.com company.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, if you've not grown with the internet, right, you don't know how to verify real internet searches and in real time, right? Have the privilege of understanding like, okay, a phishing attack looks like this, or our companies or our organizations like Rubrik that will give us the things in order to like be prepared. But if you don't even know what hotmail.com was, how are you going to know that you're potentially vulnerable? That is such an interesting way of thinking about it, because so often in these conversations, we base it off of the assumption that everybody has the same access, and that's just not the case.
And it's
Yeah.
just not the case. I mean, I was doing some research in preparation for this interview, and to make you all proud, Cass, of me being very well prepared. And so I took the example of Pakistan, right? But let's just bring it closer to home. In the US in 2019, 79% of white households had broadband access compared to 66% of African American households and 61% of Hispanic households. Again, highlighting the disparity. So this access to knowledge via something that we think is a baseline norm, which is the internet, it is actually not the baseline norm in many families and in many countries, including the more developed parts of the world, like the US.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that you bring up 2019, because when you also parallel those statistics with how people were learning in 2020 and 2021, and now those folks are coming into the job market, right? So if you did not have access to broadband internet in 2020 and you were expected to learn, graduate high school, maybe even let's assume that you had access and ability to go to college. Now you're at a point where you're supposed to be competing with people who have grown up with the internet, who have also had access to the internet during those times, and then also are upskilled in terms of cybersecurity and AI awareness, right? And so it's just creating more and more of a gap there. And I think by not being aware, we're doing a disservice, not just to the people now, but to the people in the future.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And that's where I feel like it's not just a underrepresented groups problem, right? We talk about underrepresented groups, and it's almost always the underrepresented groups that talk about the problems that other underrepresented groups have, right? This is like an age-old issue. And I almost feel like every organization, and Rubrik does a really great job of this, needs to up-level that conversation, that it's everyone's responsibility. If you are aware of a local community group and maybe in the community center they do have some laptops, and your company, and we do internal training around cybersecurity. What is a phishing attack? What do you do? That content exists. It exists in pretty much every single company that I've worked for, and it's fairly simple and basic. Wouldn't it be amazing if we started making some of that content? Because it's not It's not IP, right? It's just generic content available to some of these community groups. And if companies, big tech companies, medium-sized tech companies played a much more proactive role in that, then I think baseline knowledge around what is cybersecurity, what are the vulnerabilities, even basic things like what is ransomware, how is it affecting businesses?
Yeah.
People that don't have the privilege of having access to that maybe are not in the workplace. Maybe to your point, they've not had the access and the enablement, and maybe they will never have a shot at being in the workplace, but at least they still have a source of getting that information, getting that knowledge. And I think that's everyone's responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. So that leads me perfectly to the next question. So, how can fostering inclusivity within the current teams that we have, right, enhance the cybersecurity measures that, and also give us the ability to address the challenges more with more efficacy, with more, and do it more effectively? So, as we foster more inclusivity within current tech teams, how does that connect to our cybersecurity measures and challenges?
Well, I think, first of all, organizations have to commit to taking some actions. And there are some simple things that each organization has to do. So, number one is making it a commitment that there should be diversity within cybersecurity teams. This includes ensuring that they are intentionally recruiting, mentoring, and promoting individuals from underrepresented groups so that those underrepresented groups are able to have a seat at the table, represent themselves in a broader society today that is not represented, and design a more inclusive and secure system. So that's one. Second thing is tailored security training, basic things like offer multi-language training, offer training that is culturally relevant to some groups. All training right now is pretty generic, it's pretty vanilla. Why don't we start tailoring that to employees from different education backgrounds, from different, potentially different cultures, different races, different genders? Because the way that we all learn and the way that we all consume, it's uniquely different. What resonates with me based on my experience and how I've grown up might not be the same thing that resonates with you. So having a little bit more tailored approach to learning and development, specifically when it comes to training like security training, which, let's face it, Kaz, most people are like, oh, where's the next button? Next. How can you make it more engaging?
Yeah.
And then the third thing, which I think some tech companies have started to do pretty well, is collaborate with NGOs and government, various different government initiatives and community groups to secure infrastructure and tools for underrepresented groups. And we just focus collectively on doing those few things together. I think that we can make really good steps and strides towards this ever evolving challenge of cybersecurity.
Yeah, you bring us something really interesting because I don't think we often understand how non-government organizations can really help with the stretching of the resources that are available, right? Because a lot of times they are, already in the communities that we're trying to reach and trying to better understand. And so being able to work in tandem makes a lot of sense, but I don't hear us speaking about that very much in the channel or in cyber specifically, which is such an interesting thing. Maybe there's an opportunity for us and Rubrik to work together on that. That would be really cool.
Love to sign me up. And I think the reason why it's not happening, and this is why I was so excited for this conversation, is because we are so occupied with the big problem. The big problem is all organizations are vulnerable to cyber threats. It doesn't matter who you are. So we're very much focused here, but we have to bring it down a couple of levels and say, okay, who are the groups? Who are the most vulnerable? And then what are the resources that we have today that we can leverage that are already out there to try and increase and strengthen that baseline knowledge?
Yeah, and I think the cool part about it is when you have diverse teams as a background perspective, then it takes the pressure a little bit off of the developers who maybe have already been there because you don't have to know everything. You can literally lean on somebody who has an experience that you don't have and you get to learn from them, but then also it makes the product better because you don't have to be the end all be all for this development process. I mean, I think it's genius. I can tell why you're in the position that you're in because you clearly think about this in a way that is actionable, right? So Let's talk about the organizations, what organizations can do, right? And I don't want you to give away all your tips and tricks, because I think, some of that needs to be kept for your internal stakeholders, right? But what do you think organizations could do, or should they do to ensure that they're building inclusive culture that prioritizes the protection of these underrepresented groups and organizations that we talked about?
Absolutely. I think it's a big question and a very hard one to answer, and just the limited amount of time that we have. So I'll maybe just think of like one thing that could be most impactful. I think one thing that could be most impactful is being really, really intentional, and somebody at the top, and I mean somebody very senior, taking a look across the organization, including the cybersecurity teams, and asking a very simple question. What does diversity and inclusion look like today in this team? Forget everyone else. In this team, no Ghazal's organization. I'm at 40%, by the way, gender representation. It's very good.
We love
Um,
that.
we love that, and I still have ways to go. Still have ways to go. But let's look at the cybersecurity teams in specific. What does the diversity and inclusion look like there today? And let's have a very honest view of that, not just a view that makes us feel good. What are the gaps, and then what is a 3-year plan to address it, and have some specific goals in place? I want to make sure that there is a 50-50 representation of gender in this group. I want to make sure that we are culturally diverse and everybody has a seat at the table. I want to make sure that I am hiring people both that have had further education from an Ivy League school, but then also people that have followed unconventional paths. And at least if we can get a view of what does great look like, then you can hold each other accountable to working towards that. Today, there's not even consensus on what does great look like, which is a problem, because if you can't define what it looks like, then how the heck are you going to get there?
Correct. 100%. I love what you said about looking at what we actually have and measuring the things, not just that make us feel good, right? And I think there's so much, this is why we say equity and inclusion work is so much about emotional intelligence, because it's not about just feeling good for the sake of, oh, look at our numbers and all that stuff. We can look at things in a very concrete and actionable or actual way without just waiting for them to make us feel good, because sometimes we don't want to measure it because we're going to feel badly about it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. But that's sometimes the sobering moment that we need, right? Like sometimes that is the reality check that we need, grounded on the here and now. And you know what? If things are not great, then guess what? The opportunity there is that you can make them better. But if you're
Correct.
sat from a place of like, oh, we've done such great work, like, we, of a group of 10 people, we hired one ethnically diverse person, like fantastic. Now we have 10% representation. We solved it.
We solved it.
Well, girl, please. Not having any of it.
Yeah. Listen, I could talk to you for hours, I'm sure. One day we will, how would you say it, split a pint, and we'll like go and just hang out. But until then, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights. I'm so excited to share this with our audience. And we look forward to seeing you in person one day soon.
Can't wait. Thanks a lot, Cass, and thanks a lot for doing this.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Channel Women in Security from CRN TV. Be sure to subscribe for more stories from the women who are shaping cybersecurity, breaking barriers, and making their mark on the channel ecosystem.